Hey guys, today I'm taking on the difficult task of ranking Joni Mitchell's discography. Since Joni is such a brilliant lyricist, I thought I'd highlight some of my favorite lyrics from each album. So, let's get right to it. At number 19, I've got Dog Eat Dog. There seems like a time in every artist's career that they go synth pop, and usually that's a mistake. The guitar on this album is played by Michael Landau. Joni Mitchell abandoned her guitar completely. This is unfortunate because I think her guitar playing is her greatest strength behind her lyricism. The album makes heavy use of the Fairlight CMI. In my Kate Bush video, I talked about how her and Peter Gabriel pioneered the use of the Fairlight. It makes me happy to see Joni, one of Kate's greatest influences, following in her footsteps. I suppose it's not a bad synth pop record, but I don't know if I call it a good Joni Mitchell record. But I don't hate it. The highlighted lyric is, "Preacher preaching love like vengeance, preaching love like hate, calling for large donations, promising estates, rolling lawns and angel bands behind the pearly gates. You know, he will have his in this life, but yours will have to wait. He's immaculately tax-free." Number 18, Chalkmark in a Rainstorm. Half of the songs on this album are solo works, while the rest are collaborative efforts with big names, like Peter Gabriel. The Beat of Black Wings is a great song, and the Peter Gabriel intro track is pretty good too. But in my opinion, the other collaborations fall far short of the mark that Joni usually sets for herself. And honestly, the Billy Idol track is atrocious. The highlighted lyric is, "There's a man drawing pictures on the sidewalk with chalk. Just as fast as he draws them, rain come down and wash them off. Keep the drinks coming, girl, till I can't feel anything. I'm just a chalk mark in a rainstorm. I'm just the beat of black wings." Number 17, Taming the Tiger. This is a pleasant album. It's laid back and relaxed, and nice for having on in the background. I'm just not sure what it stands for, and I find it a bit forgettable. Honestly, when I think about this album, I just think about the adorable self-portrait on the cover that was painted by Joni herself, like she did many of her album covers. The highlighted lyric is, "We pushed the bed up to the window to see the Christmas lights on the east bank across the streaming river. Between the bridges lit up Paris-like, this river has run through both our lives. Between these banks of our continuing delights, bless us, don't let us lose the drift. You know, happiness is the best facelift." Number 16, Turbulent, Indigo. The album is inspired by Dutch Impressionist painter Vincent van Gogh, who is referenced on the title track. Joni said, "Indigo is a kind of blue, greenish blue, kind of an old man jean blue." Van Gogh used it a lot in his painting. Turbulent Indigo, among the many things that it refers to, are the turbulent blue strokes of some of Van Gogh's canvases. It also refers to the emotional disturbances that are associated with the production of these strokes. I see this album and Taming the Tiger as a pair, but I'd say that this is definitely the stronger of the two works. Tracks like Sex Kills showed that Joni Mitchell was still on the top of her game. The highlighted lyric is, "Doctor's pills give you brand new ills, and the bills bury you like an avalanche. And lawyers haven't been this popular since Robespierre slaughtered half of France." This refers to Maximilien Robespierre, who oversaw the Reign of Terror during the French Revolution. In just a few short years, tens of thousands of people were guillotined. Poetic justice was served when Robespierre himself was executed, creating a power vacuum that was eventually filled by Napoleon. In number 15, I put Mingus. This is Joni's collaboration with the great jazz singer Charles Mingus. Pianist Herbie Hancock and saxophonist Wayne Shorter also feature on this album. In the album notes, Joni said, "The first time I saw his face, it shone up at me with a joyous mischief. I liked him immediately. I had come to New York to hear 6 new songs he had written for me. I was honored. I was curious. It was as if I had been standing by a river, one toe in the water, feeling it out, and Charlie came by and pushed me in, sink or swim, him laughing at me, dog paddling around in the currents of black classical music. I was trying to please Charlie and still be true to myself. I cut each song 3 or 4 times. I was after something personal, something mutual, something indescribable." Mingus and Mitchell are titans of their respective genres, so the collaboration was very highly anticipated, and Mingus's death shortly before the album was released increased the hype even more. Not surprisingly, many people felt let down by the result, and I can't say I blame them. But I think going into this album with very little expectations helped me enjoy it a lot more. I will say that this album is a bit messy. A lot of the interludes feel unnecessary, and a few of the songs are underdeveloped. The highlighted lyric is, "We move in measures through love's changing faces, needy and nonchalant, greedy and gracious, through petty dismissals and grand embraces like it was only a dance." Number 14 is Wild Things Run Fast. I would say that this is easily her best 80s album. One of the most striking things about this album is the slappy bass. In fact, it's so slappy it kind of slaps you in the face. The bassist is Larry Klein, who was married to Joni for 12 years. The bass is both the album's greatest asset and its greatest detriment. It's like chocolate. At first you can't get enough of it, but it's sickeningly sweet and you soon get tired of it. The album is driven by rhythm. Joni was inspired by the bands Steely Dan, Talking Heads, and The Police. She said their rhythmic hybrids and the positioning of the drums and the sound of the drums was one of the main calls out to me to make a more rhythmic album. It's very front-loaded. The first track, Chinese Cafe, Unchained Melody, is Joni at her finest. The lyric I've selected to highlight comes from this track. Uranium money is booming in the old hometown now. It's putting up sleek concrete, tearing the old landmarks down now. Paving over brave little parks, ripping off Indian land again. How long, how long? Number 13 is Song to a Seagull. This is where it all began. I feel bad ranking it this low. I know a lot of you really love this album. It was produced by her boyfriend at the time, David Crosby of the Byrds, and later on, Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young. Crosby commented, "Joni is not a person you stay in a relationship with. It always goes awry, no matter who you are. It's an inevitable thing. We were starting to have a friction, and at the same time I was starting to produce her record and I didn't know how." In the book Joni, The Creative Odyssey of Joni Mitchell, Catherine Monk argued Crosby didn't know how to produce a record, but he was powerful and experienced enough in the music industry to sell his production skills to the Warner executives. Crosby says he used too many mics and created an almost cataclysmic system hiss on the masters. They found John Haney, an engineer for Elektra Records, who stripped off the hiss, but at a price. The audio lost a chunk of its range on the high end, and as a result, it feels flattened and condensed. It's a good album, but the lyrics and composition pale in comparison to her later work. The highlighted lyric is, "Fly, silly seabird, no dreams can possess you, no voices can blame you. For sun on your wings, my gentle relations have names they must call me. For loving the freedom of all flying things, my dream with the seagulls fly, out of reach, out of cry." Number 12 is Both Sides Now. This is one of Joni's 2 cover albums. It weaves jazz standards together with 2 of her own songs to represent the beginning, middle, and end of a relationship. Other than Big Yellow Taxi, this would have been my first exposure to Joni Mitchell, as it's used as a prominent plot device in the film Love Actually. Something I love about this album is the maturity of her vocals gives new meanings to songs she wrote in her youth, and it turns them into completely different songs. Take the title track, which I've chosen to highlight. "But now old friends are acting strange. They shake their hands, they say I've changed. Well, something's lost, but something's gained in living every day. I've looked at life from both sides now, from win and lose, and still somehow, it's life's illusions I recall. I really don't know life at all." Joni's song selections demonstrate her exceptional taste. Some that stand out to me are At Last and You're My Thrill, popularized by Etta James and Peggy Lee respectively. Then there's You've Changed, a song famously covered by Billie Holiday on her album Lady in Satin. Lady in Satin actually reminds me a lot of Both Sides Now. Both albums are by female singers allegedly past their prime, featuring jazz standards with orchestration so luscious it threatens to cover up the artist's vocals, even though the lived experience those vocals bring are what make them so great. Number 11, Night Ride Home. I consider this a return to form for Joni. It returns to a more guitar-driven sound and contains some of her greatest lyrics. For example, she shrewdly weaves biblical imagery with oil companies on the song Passion Play, implying that they have an almost religious control over the masses. Another track that stands out to me is Cherokee Louise, a soul-crushing story of child abuse. The album is really warm and comfy though. I love the subtle jazz undertones laced with her guitar, which really reminds me of 70s Joni. The first time I listened to it, I was slogging through snow that was up to my knees, so I found the song Coming In From the Cold to be very relatable. The highlighted lyric is, "Back in 1957, we had to dance a foot apart, and they hawk-eyed us from the sidelines holding their rulers without a heart. And so, with just a touch of our fingers, I could make our circuitry explode. All we ever wanted was just to come in from the cold." Number 10, Clouds. This album has a beautiful self-portrait on the cover of Joni holding a prairie flower. Chelsea Morning is a wonderful, underrated Joni song, but it's Both Sides Now, originally written for Judy Collins, that propels this album up my ranking. It's simply one of the most eloquent songs ever written. She was inspired to write this song while on a plane reading a passage from Saul Bellows' Henderson the Rain King. "And I dreamed down at the clouds, and thought that when I was a kid I had dreamed up at them. And having dreamed at the clouds from both sides, as no generation of men has done, one should be able to accept his death very easily." It's not that the rest of the songs are weak, I just feel like she has much more consistent albums. The highlighted lyric is, "Rows and flows of angel hair, and ice cream castles in the air, and feather canyons everywhere, I've looked at clouds that way. But now they only block the sun, they rain and snow on everyone. So many things I would have done, but clouds get in my way." Number 9 is Shine. I have an emotional connection to this album because it's probably the last Joni Mitchell album we'll ever get. The album begins with a stunning instrumental with saxophones, flute, and piano all bouncing off each other. Each instrument is given its moment to shine. There's no words, so it lulls you into thinking this album will be a continuation of the sound from Travelogue. When she was writing this album, she was reflecting on many things that were happening in the world. such as the war in Iraq, Hurricane Katrina, and the 2004 tsunami. She said, "I haven't written in 10 years, and what's coming out of me is all sociological and theological complaint. At first I thought I was going over new territory, but then I realized that many of the people who went over this territory were killed." The album has an extraordinarily pessimistic tone, with some of the darkest lines that Joni has ever written, such as holy war, genocide, suicide, hate, and cruelty. How can this be holy? If I had a heart, I'd cry. In an interview from 2007, she said, "Is it entirely hopeless? I don't know. Rationally, I have no hope. Irrationally, I believe in miracles." I just love that. One of the songs is a reworked version of Big Yellow Taxi, which was noticeably absent on Travelogue. Its presence makes a lot of sense because it's about how the world is going to hell, and this album is about how the world has gone to hell. It's Joni Mitchell saying, "I told you so. You don't know what you've got till it's gone. Well, now it's gone." The highlighted lyric is, "We have poisoned everything, and oblivious to it all, the cell phone zombies babble through the shopping malls." Number 8, Don Juan's Reckless Daughter. I'd like to acknowledge that this album has an asterisk next to it because Joni wears blackface on the cover. I'm not going to make any excuses for her because the use of blackface is inexcusable. However, I can't let outside factors influence my ranking of the music, and Don Juan is a great album. Critics were taken aback by it and didn't know how to react. A lot of people say that this is where Joni's discography dips in quality, but I really don't think it's all that worse than Hejira, to be honest. It's easily the most experimental of her albums. It takes the jazz fusion of Hejira to a new level, and that alienated a lot of fans. Chaka Khan is featured on Dreamland, a track where the vocals are backed only by percussion. Then there's Talk to Me, a song about touring with Bob Dylan. Joni was frustrated by his guarded, enigmatic nature and expresses a desire to have an actual conversation with him. Though Joni has credited Dylan with sparking her interest in writing music, this isn't the last time they would butt heads. In 2010, Joni infamously said, "Bob is not authentic at all. He's a plagiarist, and his name and voice are fake. Everything about Bob is a deception." I don't know about that, and Joni's walked back the comments a little since. But anyway, Don Juan's ambition earns it a lot of respect from me, but I find it a bit grueling in parts. The highlighted lyric is, "I wish I had the wings of Noah's pretty little white dove, so I could fly this raging river to reach the one I love. But I have no wings, and the water is so wide. We'll have to row a little harder, it's just in dreams we fly." Number 7 is Ladies of the Canyon. This is where Joni starts to take on more ambitious themes, like environmentalism, feminism, and troubled relationships. I really love Morning Morgantown and Rainy Night House, but it's the 3-track run at the end of the album that is legendary. They're 3 of her most iconic songs. I've heard Big Yellow Taxi so many times that my mind started to become numb to it, but it's such a great song, and I love how it takes on such serious subject matter while remaining playful. Actually, I feel like as she grew older and became more disillusioned with the world, I feel like her songs lost a lot of the playfulness that made her early albums so much fun. The next song is Woodstock. Joni wasn't actually at Woodstock due to scheduling conflicts, but that didn't stop her from writing about it. It was famously covered by Crosby, Stills, Nash & Young, who were there, and became an anthem among festival goers. The highlighted lyric is from Woodstock. It goes, "We are stardust, billion-year-old carbon. We are golden, caught in the devil's bargain. And we've got to get ourselves back to the garden." It's the sort of lyric that you can get lost in for a long time if you're not careful. The more you think about it, you begin to realize we really are a billion-year-old carbon. Finally, there's the closing track, The Circle Game, with the beautiful Crosby, Stills, and Nash backing vocals. It's a response to Sugar Mountain by Neil Young, who is absent from the track. Sugar Mountain is a very cynical song Neil wrote when he was 19, mourning the loss of his youth. The Circle Game is about how it's important to look to the future rather than spending too much time dwelling on the past. All in all, Ladies in the Canyon is the first of many truly great Joni albums. Number 6 is Travelogue. This was the last Joni album I heard before finishing her discography. I would heavily discourage anyone from listening to it until they've heard everything that comes before it. I listened to it while walking from one side of my city to the other. It was so powerful I started crying. I don't know if I've had a more intense first listen. The album chronicles Joni Mitchell's career. It takes songs from all of her albums, making it a diary of sorts, as the name implies. The contemporary folk pop, and jazz pop songs that make up the majority of her catalog are reworked as more traditional-sounding vocal jazz songs. Some melodies are changed significantly, which could be a bit jarring to some, but I really didn't mind it. This is the great Joni Mitchell songbook. As one of the greatest songwriters of her generation, I feel like it could fit right in with Ella Fitzgerald's Great American Songbooks series. At the time, it was intended to be her last album, so it feels like this beautiful swan song. It's a love letter to her career, and ties it into a neat little bow that Shine would later unravel, but maybe that's the point. She again closes this album with The Circle Game. Much like Both Sides Now, this takes on a new meaning in her older years. Rather than looking towards the future, This whole album is about reflecting backward on what she has achieved. The highlighted lyric is, "In the seasons they go round and round, and the painted ponies go up and down. We're captive on the carousel of time. We can't return, we can only look behind from where we came, and go round and round and round in the circle game." Number 5, The Hissing of Summer Lawns. This is a wacky record. I don't really know what to make of it still. This is definitely the album I had most difficulty ranking. I really can't think of any album that sounds like this to compare it to. It's completely and utterly unique. It starts like a standard Joni album, but when In France They Kiss on Main Street turns into the jungle line, she takes a hard left turn. The blurring of urban spaces with wilderness is a recurring motif throughout the record. The cover art depicts 4 indigenous African children carrying a snake across a field against the backdrop of LA. The metaphors are ingenious. In Harry's house, she likens taxis to a school of fishes and a helicopter to a dragonfly. And she uses the hissing snakes of the title as a metaphor for the sprinklers that dot the lawns of Los Angeles' suburbs. My friend Mika pointed out that a lot of the songs are character portraits of women in unhealthy relationships. Edith in The Kingpin, for example, describes the beginning of a doomed relationship between a mobster and his latest love interest, who he will soon grow tired of. And then of course there's the title track. Joni wrote it when she went to the wedding of Puerto Rican musician Jose Feliciano, and it's her interpretation of his marriage. The highlighted lyric is, "He bought her a diamond for her throat. He put her in a ranch house on a hill. She could see the valley barbecues from her windowsill. See the blue pools in the squinting sun. Hear the hissing of summer lawns. He put up a barbed wire fence to keep out the unknown, and on every metal thorn just a little blood of his own." This is where the hissing snakes come into play. Not only do they deter anyone from stepping onto the yard, they also keep anyone from leaving. It turns the lawn into a castle moat. I also find it interesting how he buys the diamond to shut his wife up rather than to make her happy. I just really love the raw energy of this album. All the components are mashed together and it's really unpolished, in stark contrast to Court and Spark and Hejira, which come before and after it. But that's exactly the point. Joni took a huge creative risk and it really paid off. Number 4 is Hejira. Joni stumbled upon the album title while searching in the dictionary for a word that meant running away with honor. The title is derived from the Arabic word Hejira. The Merriam-Webster dictionary definition of the word is a journey, especially when undertaken to escape from a dangerous or undesirable situation. The word originated with Muhammad's escape from Mecca to Medina. Part of this album was written on a cross-country trip, so a lot of the songs have imagery of the road and traveling in and out of small towns. Joni also worked on this album while touring with Bob Dylan. Coyote is a stunning opening track. There is a wonderful video that shows Joni playing it with Bob Dylan at Gordon Lightfoot's house. The highlighted lyric is from Furry Sings the Blues, a song about Furry Lewis. Furry sings the blues. Why should I expect that old guy to give it to me true? Fallen to hard luck, and time and other thieves. While our limo is shining on his shanty street, old Furry sings the blues. Not surprisingly, Lewis wasn't too flattered by the picture that Joni painted of him. Referring to her as that woman, he complained, "The way I feel is that your name is proper only to you, and when you use it, you should get results from it. She shouldn't have used my name in no way, shape, form, or faction without consulting me about it first. The woman came over here and I treated her right, just like I does everybody that comes over. She wanted to hear about the old days, said it was for her own personal self, and I told it to her like it was. Gave her straight oil from the can. But then she goes and puts it all down on a record, using my name and not giving me nothing. I can't stop nobody from talking about Beale Street, because the street belongs to everybody. But when she says furry, well, that belongs to me." Joni's manager later responded, "All she said about him was, Furry sings the blues, the rest is about the neighborhood. She doesn't even mention his last name. She really enjoyed meeting him, and wrote about her impressions of the meeting. He did tell her that he didn't like her, but we can't pay him royalties for that. I don't pay royalties to everybody who says they don't like me. I'd go broke." The album fuses jazz with her folk rock roots, resulting in a very mellow sound. I find it so relaxing, and I'm able to return to it again and again. Number 3 is For the Roses. If somebody told me years ago that someday I'd consider this one of Joni's best, I'd tell them they're crazy. But the more I listen to it, the more it grows on me. It never really got the credit that it was due, in part because it's more subtle than Blue and Court and Spark, the two mountains of Joni's discography. Despite this, there are still a lot of biting lines that make your eyes widen, like the line, "Some turn to Jesus, some turn to heroin," from Banquet. The album was heavily inspired by Joni's crumbling relationship with James Taylor, who eventually left her for Carole King. You Turn Me On, I'm a Radio was written by Joni because their label was begging her to craft another hit. She thought by including lots of radio imagery she could entice radio stations to play the song, which worked. It's one of the most popular songs in her catalog. What I really love about For the Roses is that there's so many nuances and unique creative choices in her vocals, like the way she stutters in Banquet or the layers of her voice on Cold Blue Steel. It's just a really delightful album that's unfairly slept on and deserves far more props. Joni was struggling with her newfound fame when she was recording this record. As you can see on the highlighted lyric, remember the days when you used to sit and make up your tunes for love and pour your simple sorrow to the sound hole and your knee? And now you're seen on giant screens and at parties for the press. And for people who have slices of you from the company, they toss around your latest golden egg. Speculation, well, who's to know if the next one in the nest will glitter for them so. So Joni was feeling a lot of pressure to follow up Blue with an equally received album. I'd say she did a pretty good job. Number 2 is Blue. If I was ranking her albums by their influence or critical acclaim, of course this album would be number 1. Are you kidding me? What makes this album so monumental is her honesty. She was bluntly talking about things no one was talking about. Reflecting on the album, Joni said, "The Blue album, there's hardly a dishonest note in the vocals. At that period of my life, I had no personal defenses. I felt like a cellophane wrapper on a pack of cigarettes. I felt like I had absolutely no secrets from the world, and I couldn't pretend in my life to be strong, or to be happy. But the advantage of it in the music was that there were no defenses there either." When she played the album for country singer Chris Christopherson, he exclaimed, "Joni, keep something to yourself." One example of Joni's brute honesty is on the song Little Green, about the child she gave up for adoption. Joni was reunited with her daughter in 1997. She's also referenced in the excellent Chinese Cafe Unchained Melody off of Wild Things Run Fast. There's so much emotion embedded on these songs, like the way she sings I Made My Baby Cry so mournfully on River, or the crescendos on her vocals in A Case of You, almost like she's so excited by the love she's feeling for this person. Speaking of A Case of You, I wanted to highlight these lyrics. "Just before our love got lost, you said, 'I am as constant as a northern star.' And I said, 'Constantly in the darkness, where's that at? If you want me, I'll be in the bar.'" If that doesn't demonstrate how skilled Joni is as a writer, I don't know what will. My all-time favorite Joni song is California. It's just got so many strong points. I think it's her best vocal performance, and I love how it documents her travels around the world, from Greece to Spain to France, finally back to California. Though I will say, I always found it ironic that she considers California her home, considering she's from Saskatchewan. She doesn't completely shun her Canadian roots on this album though, as she sings the first lines of O Canada in A Case of You. But anyway, the lyrics on California are incredibly relatable, like when she sings about feeling lonely while surrounded by strangers, or when she's pleading to be accepted as she is, all strung out on someone. Then there's the part about kissing a sunset pig, which I used to take literally, but it turns out she's actually talking about the police officers on Sunset Boulevard in LA. Blue is inventive sonically too. On This Flight Tonight, there's this really unique sound effect where she puts her voice through a filter that makes it sound like you're sitting next to her while she's listening to music super loudly on her headphones. I hardly ever see people talking about this sound effect, but I think it's one of the coolest parts of the whole album. I feel like I also need to talk about all the complex guitar tunings Joni uses in the songs throughout her career, on Blue included. She has used over 50 different tunings in her songs. It adds another layer of complexity and makes her composing skills all the more impressive. I consider Blue to be a perfect album, and I don't think there's anything she could have done to improve it. There's just another perfect album I think narrowly edges it out. And that's number 1, Court and Spark. For a long time, Blue was my favorite Joni album, and this was a distant second. I was only really a fan of a few of the tracks, like Help Me, whereas I loved every song on Blue. But over time, every so often, another song from Court and Spark would suddenly click for me, and I'd have to play it over and over again. Eventually, I realized that I really, really adore this record, so much so that I can confidently say that I think it's her best. This album puts her on a long path of increasing jazz influence that would eventually lead her away from folk music completely. The album consists of beautiful, delicate, piano-driven ballads, such as the title track or People's Parties, intertwined with energetic, manic jazz pop songs like Car on a Hill and Raised on Robbery. I'm a huge Toronto Maple Leafs fan, so I always thought it was kind of cool that she references the team on the song Raised on Robbery. Not that I let something like that influence my ranking or anything, but the tracks have really strong intros, making them burrow themselves into your head from the very start. Some of my favorites are the opening riffs on Troubled Child and Just Like This Train. The album is a grand artistic statement where Joni demands recognition. Free Man in Paris is so self-confident, one could almost say it's pretentious. But at this point in her career, Joni has earned the right to say she is stoking the star maker machinery behind the popular song. I considered the closing track, Twisted, to be more of a bonus track than part of the album. It's a cover of a 1952 Annie Ross song. Joni said, "I went through analysis for a while this year, and the song is about analysis. I figured that I earned the right to sing it. I tried to put it on the last record for the Roses, but it was totally inappropriate. It had nothing to do with the time period, and some of my friends feel it has nothing to do with this album either. It's added like an encore. Joni injects her personality into the song and makes it more upbeat, and honestly, I think her version is vastly superior to the original. She truly makes it her own. The highlighted lyric is, "So why does it come as such a shock, to know you really have no one? Only a river of changing faces, looking for an ocean, they trickle through your leaky plans, another dream over the dam, and you're lying in some room, feeling like your right to be human is going over too." You can tell that she went through the lyrics with a fine-toothed comb. Not a single word feels out of place. And you can say the same about the melodies and instrumentation too. It goes back and forth between intense and calm songs, like waves on the seashore, and the pacing is perfect. That's why Chord and Spark is my favorite Joni album. Well, that's my ranking. Do you agree? Disagree? Leave a comment below, and if you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. Until next time.